Illuman. Men helping other men to become better, more authentic men. Please visit our website at illuman.org.
Good morning, brothers. The well is full. We've had a night to dream with the mountain, or with the river, dream with the forest, the mesa, or maybe the mountain kept you up. Both are good. But you're here now. We're really here now. So, another infusion of poetry. So be careful, because you might start behaving differently or speaking differently. But I'll be gentle. This poem, though, is a little bit more mysterious and strange and even provocative. It's a voice other than my own that speaks to me. I call this voice the Intoxicator. The Intoxicator is challenging me into a greater life, into my real life. And I invite you to lean into the possibility of a voice like that, greater than yourself. That's calling to us, always calling to us to the next unfoldment, the next expansion. And that's the voice that probably brought you here. All the reasons that you have or that you stated for being here are usually not the real reasons. You discover why you're here when you're here. It presents itself to you. So as a way of further engaging you in the poetry, bringing us together in the poetry, I invite you to pay attention to any line or phrase or piece of the poem that strikes you, negatively or positively, but anywhere where there's a feeling, and notice that. Try to even catch those words, 2 words, 3 words, a line, whatever it is. But see where the poem is inviting you. Don't try to interpret or figure out what it's telling you. Just that something was felt. When the invisible one, the intoxicator, who sets my heart to music, speaks, the coded language is always lean and bold. He says, "Are you fearful of the fall, O blue eyes, of the descent and the deep, dark passages on a man's rightful path? Will you keep moving in that careful, calculated way, presupposing pitfalls for another 100 turns of the moon? Do you not yearn for the dead grid of city streets to crumble apart so you could for once be lost and at last present? Timothy, if I pull you down into the blind matrix of the warm, earthly clay, would you dare to sleep a night beside the fiery-haired Sunfather? And could you dig your way out to air and lay your virgin hands upon the soft, crystalline underbellies of the star people? Is there not yet something you must do? Somewhere you must go before you root by the fireplace as the white-bearded storyteller? Or would you rather stay put? All your bookmarks and teacups in place, your bills and insurances in good order, rotting from the center outward. Are you fearful of the fall? Are you fearful of the fall, of the descent and the deep, dark passages on a man's rightful path? Will you keep moving in that careful, calculated way, presupposing pitfalls for another 100 turns of the moon? Do you not yearn for the dead grid of city streets to crumble apart so you could for once be lost and at last present? If you are pulled down into the dark, earthly clay, would you dare to sleep a night beside the fiery-haired Sun Father? And then could you dig your way out to air and lay your virgin hands upon the soft, crystalline underbellies of the star people? Is there not yet something you must do? Somewhere you must go before you root by the fireplace as the white-bearded storyteller? Or would you rather stay put? All your bookmarks and teacups in place, your bills and insurances in good order, rotting from the center outward. Oh. So I want to go to each of the 4 sections, maybe just twice, and any line from any of you, just sound it out. So we have 8 lines or 8 pieces, whatever hit you, where you are in the poem, where you felt you are in the poem. So anyone from here. And speak it out.
Fearful of the ball. Lost, but at last present. Rotting from the inside out. Deep and bold. Deep and bold. Is there not something you must yet do? And right path. Pitfalls.
One more time.
100 turns of the moon. You would rather stay put, huh? Underbelly to the sky.
Oh. So today, it's the Intoxicator Calling. Will you answer? When you go out into the land, that's one of the things you might listen for, is a voice other than the typical, usual barking. Something else rising from the earth, coming from the stars. And this, I want to say that if you didn't yet draw from this well, you can. And then you can bring back the poems that you drew and take another. And the only instruction is to not only read them, but speak them out on the land. Speak that language out. And listen for the mythopoetic language that wants to come through you today. And what the intoxicator might be inviting you into, which is perhaps to speak in poetry, perhaps to sing, perhaps to lay still on the earth, perhaps to dance. What is this strange thing on the schedule? So I'll leave you with Hafiz, who said, every child has known God. Every child has known God. Not the God of names, not the God of don'ts, not the God who ever does anything weird, but the God who knows only 4 words and keeps repeating them, saying, "Come, dance with me. Come, dance."
I could stare at all of you for eternity. It seems to me that's what's held in that gaze. It is truly well with my soul to sit here with all of you brothers and to sit in your presence in this council circle. And so, as Joel mentioned earlier, every time we gather in such a abundance of riches with all the love that we share with one another, the community here that brings life, breathes deep into our soul, that we have a common intention that we will do our work together. We will not let that possibility escape us. Deep speaking unto deep. Yeah. Oh. And not only do we long for it, brother, but the whole world longs for it. Yeah. And so we gather in this council circle this morning, and we're going to hold council. Generally, the form of this is what we call a Fishbowl Council, where we speak here in this circle, but there's a larger circle that is held by you as the cloud of witnesses. And you hold us in this space, and you are listening from the heart. And we are committing to speak from the heart in this space. Richard and I are the designated council carriers, and we've been asked to carry this session in a similar way to a dyad council. So you will hear us speaking more than usual. Don't do this when you go to your council. You have to practice a long time to do what Richard and I are going to do. These other men will join us in this council as much as possible, but we're cognizant of our time, and we want to get you out onto the land where you can have another kind of deep conversation. So we will get right to it. Perhaps just very briefly introduce yourself and where you were initiated.
I'm Ned Abendroth from Seattle, and I was initiated at Aravaipa Canyon in 2012.
Joel Blanc from Virginia, made my rites in 2006, Frost Valley, New York.
Belden Lane from St. Louis. I was initiated at Ghost Ranch in 2004.
Oh.
Richard Fay from Brisbane, Australia, and I made my rites in Queensland, Australia in 2009.
Oh.
Giovanni Perez, I live in Los Angeles, and I was initiated in Julian, California, 2005.
Oh.
Jim Clark from San Gabriel in California, near Los Angeles. I was initiated at Ghost Ranch in 1995.
Oh. I'm Jim Taylor. I was initiated at Ghost Ranch in 2006. Oh. So, brothers, we'd like to open up with dedications. If you have a dedication, just speak loudly. The first one, please light the candle, and we welcome who you need to welcome to our council circle.
I dedicate this council to all the men here present and all the men who will see this experience. Their hunger for transformation and wholeness may truly be received and experienced. Ho.
While he lights that, continue, please.
I dedicate this council to all the lost boys.
I dedicate this council to Stephen Potter, who represents all the men who have made their final initiation. And the last time I held council on this soil, it was with him.
I dedicate this council to for all that is yet to come, for all the men that are yet to be part of us.
I dedicate today's council to the 90 men who are new in our circle.
I dedicate this council to the more than human world that awaits our awakening.
And I dedicate our council to all the men who aren't here that are longing for something just like this.
As Jim has said already, that we are men who will speak from the heart, using I statements, speaking from our life experience, our stories, how they shape us in the present. We will listen from the heart with the ears of a rabbit, not judging, not analysing, but simply as if we are walking in their moccasins. We will get to the heart, we Australians say. We will get to the marrow of our story. We will not wander around with superficiality. We will go to the guts of it. And we will be, as much as we are able, spontaneous. What is emerging in the present moment will be our truth, and it will be enough. So I would ask for the brothers other than Jim to, if they can in 1 minute, respond to this prompt. What is the first time you can recall experiencing a power greater than ourselves?
What's coming for me is the sense of awe that I would feel lying on my back in my front lawn, looking up at the clouds and losing all track of time. And that blue sky would just go on forever. And it's like the earth beneath me would start to disappear. And I'd see Snoopy up there too. And it's like a whole afternoon could pass just sitting in awe. I long for more of those moments now.
I remember being about 8 years old, and my family was on vacation in Canada. We were on Lake Ontario, and it hadn't been long before that my older cousin Deanie had instilled the fear of God in me. And part of what I remember was him telling me that if you pray hard enough, things are going to happen. And I was at the water, and there was a fish belly up. And I don't remember how it got there or how I got there, but I remember closing my eyes and praying for this fish, that it would somehow be okay. And when I opened my eyes, the fish was gone. And it made me appreciate that there's something greater going on. Hope.
I was 10 years old, and my family was not churched, and this little fundamentalist Bible church started up down the street from our house. We went. I had this wonderful Sunday school teacher that told me the story of Jesus. And I was just smitten. And so I went home and I started to write my first book. This little spiral binder. And the tears came as I wrote this amazing story of Jesus loving me. And I see that Jesus today most often in a cottonwood tree that I love. But that was the beginnings. Oh.
I was probably also about 10 years old, and this was in my hometown in Guatemala, and it was raining. We were getting a hurricane or something, and it was just pouring, and our house had a tin roof, walls made out of cardboard and wood, and the rain just kept coming, and it seeped through the bathroom, or what we had a bathroom, and a little river began to cross our living quarters, and it was getting fuller and fuller and fuller. And I remember my mother panicking, but at the same time getting a hold of herself and a hold of us. And she grabbed us and threw us onto the bed. And she was just trying to get things out of the way so that we wouldn't get hurt. And I thought, she's powerful. And she's taking care of us.
Well, for me, I guess I was late growth. I'm way behind you guys. It wasn't until I was 19. I didn't realize I had such a deep desire to know God, to experience God. So through my prayers and lots of reading, I hadn't experienced God. When I was 19, it was late summer, and I went on my first backpacking expedition with a group called Summit Expedition. And I was feeling really lonely. I didn't know anybody there, and I'd already got all my gear together, and I was sitting on a huge boulder, and I had this little pocket New Testament with Psalms, and I said, Lord, I need a word. And I just started reading the Bible assiduously, and I was stunned when I felt prompted to read Psalm 121, where it says, the sun shall not harm you by day, nor the moon by night. And I honestly felt the hand of God on me, and the fear and anxiety that I normally would carry was just gone.
So, Jim, share a story about the first time you can recall experiencing a power greater than yourself.
Well, I was 8 years old. I had lived in terror for most of my days, and I was on a Caliche Road walking down in a rural town called Lockhart, Texas, out in the middle of the wild. And I found myself praying because my mother had taken her life 2 days before this, and I was completely undone. And the terror that had been mounting all those years finally had I had no capacity for it. And so I said my first prayer ever. And I came from a family that had no idea of a power greater than themselves, apparently. We never talked about anything like that. I didn't know any kind of religion. I don't even know how I knew to pray. No one ever taught me. No one ever told me about God. But Hafiz, the same God that he's right. Every child knows. And it was not the God of a religion. And I didn't know he was saying, come dance with me, come dance with me. But in that moment, it felt like the most natural thing to do, to cry out to God. And I did. And I asked God, I said, God, this is just too much, you know. I need my mom. And so I asked him if I could, I said, I know you can do this. You can make this a really bad dream, you know. And I'll wake up tomorrow morning and everything will be all right. And I asked him. And sure enough, God spoke. I heard these words really clearly. I was not surprised by it either, which surprises me now. But the words I heard were, someone's mom has to die. And in my little 8-year-old mind, all I could do with that was that there was some sort of, connection, like either my mom dies or somebody else's mom dies. And if you get your mom back, then someone else's mom is going to have to die. And that was the first moment in my life that I knew compassion, because I didn't want anyone else to experience what I was experiencing. And so I asked God the only other thing I could, and I said, well, when I die, could I please be with her in heaven? And the voice said, absolutely. And so in that moment, I met a power greater than myself. Oh. So you witness.
Jim, I see your tears. I hear your heart. That boy had lost his most sacred connection. And something deeper, even deeper than that pain, reached to a connection beyond his knowing and found something there. Oh.
And so, Richard, can you tell us about a time where you encountered your first encounter of a power greater than yourself?
Like some of the voices I've heard, I was about 7, 6, 7, 8. I was in nature. And it wasn't the glory of nature that comforted me. It annoyed me. It frustrated me, because I had this sense that I was meant to commune with it, to communicate with it, to engage with it, but I didn't know how. I didn't have any tools. I heard Father Richard once tell a story about, I think it was a little girl who said to her baby brother, remind me where you came from, because I'm starting to forget. And that's what was going on. I was starting to forget. And in forgetting, I was becoming a separate person, a disconnected person, an isolated, alone person. And there I was in nature, and I intuited that nature wasn't disconnected, that it was together. It was holding somehow me, but I didn't know how to hold it. I didn't know that that boy would become a man who would talk to trees. So strangely, when I ask about my first awareness that I can recall of a power greater than myself, it was a little different in the sense that it was an awareness of disconnection and a longing for connection. It was an awareness that I had taken on the orphan and the beloved son was fading, and I wanted him back. Oh.
What I hear you saying, brother, what I heard in those moments is the deep longing to remember who you really are. And the power greater than ourselves always brings us to that remembrance. Oh. Second. Oh, I do it. Okay. Second prompt. How we doing, Jim? Okay. I'm 8 years old. Can we go play after this? The second prompt, brothers, is tell us how you have resisted the power greater than yourself. Tell us a story about how you have resisted over your lifetime, some point, a power greater than yourself.
convincing myself that I could do it on my own, that my supposed talents were enough, that my supposed thinking through was going to be enough, until all of that caught up with me, and my own limitations caught up with me, and I had to trip over my words, and I put my foot in my mouth, like I continue to do many times still. But that's how I resisted, thinking that I could do it on my own.
For me, it came at a very young age. I couldn't name what it was, but my father was a very different personality than me. He was a very practical man, a man who was very interested and played sports up until his late 50s. A very good man, a man of great faith, but he had no appreciation for the artistic personality or the philosophical or theological or psychological person, and that was me. And so at a young age, I shut down my artistic bent. I'd had years of art class, but I realized he never said it, but I sensed he considered it unmanly. And so I shut down, and I knew God's Spirit kept saying to me, you need to express this. And I understand now with perspective that what happened was I slipped into a minor depression because the ways that were normal for me to express emotions and thoughts and experiences, I was not acknowledging or expressing. And I was not an athlete. I wasn't any of the things that my father valued. And so I was caught between two worlds. And so reclaiming that was a major victory for me. Oh.
Well, I could just probably talk about what happened at breakfast or 2 minutes ago or in every moment. But I think there was in my early 20s this time when the like for whatever reason, through nothing I was doing, like, well, it might have been tied to my mother's passing, but I was in this thin place and everything opened up, and it just I was having charismatic experiences, but I was Presbyterian. We don't do that. Oh my God. And it scared the shit out of me. And I remember one night in my bed in my fraternity, and I had this urge to pray, and I just said, no, it's too much. It's too much. It was asking too much of me. And yeah. Oh.
When have I resisted? I'm resisting right now, I think. Because I'm trying to make it happen. I do think it happens every day for me, and which is interesting in light of the fact that I live in a religious community where we stop and pray 3 times a day. And those prayers have become for me a reminder, and that I'm resisting. And it's not so much what's said in those prayers as just sitting for a moment and pausing and stopping whatever it was I was doing before the bell rang at 10 till noon to call us to chapel, and let go of the urgency of my life and the priorities that I've set, and be reminded again that there's something bigger going on, and whatever struggle I'm facing is just part of my life, and I need to surrender to it again and again. Oh.
Well, that encounter with that Jesus in that little Sunday school class at the age of 10 got quickly overlaid with a whole lot of judgment, a whole lot of threat of hellfire and brimstone. The idea that Jesus was going to come back, the rapture any day, and I'd be left behind. And so all of that judgment, all of that threat, all of that terror just covered over that original Jesus of love. And I've had a Jesus problem for years. And it came to a little bit of a head 2 or 3 years ago. I was the next day going down to a cave in southern Missouri to spend the night alone. And it was fearful, not just because of the cave at all, but because of meeting Jesus, this scary, frightening Jesus that had been in my mind for all these years. So I go over to grandfather this tree, this cottonwood tree that I love, that mediates Jesus for me so often. And so I'm sitting there writing in my journal, leaning against him, and I hear him saying as clearly as listening to one of you, Belden, you don't have anything to worry about, anything to be afraid of going in that cave tomorrow. Who have you been meeting every night all these years, you coming over here to be with me, if not Jesus? And that deep sense of being loved, of all things, by a cottonwood tree, loved for years, and finding Jesus again. And the beginnings of coming to terms with my doubts through that tree. Hope.
So, Richard, tell us a story of how you've resisted a power greater than yourself.
In 2009, which was the year I did my rites, I had then discovered that that axiom, that truth, that we spend the first half of our lives believing we're resisting the devil, evil, only to collapse into the terrible discovery that the whole time we've been resisting God. And that's a pretty terrifying discovery when you're senior pastor of a church and you're the one resisting God most of all. I am a 7 on the Enneagram, and I embraced a theology, a worldview that said that resurrection was mine and therefore suffering was behind me. I don't quite know what I thought of aging, but somehow I was going to escape that suffering because it had been paid for by someone else. That was my theology. That's what I was told. And that's not the truth. The truth is quite something else. See, the Paschal mystery is my mystery. It's my life. And I did try, excuse those who get weirded out what I'm going to say right now, but I tried. I didn't even want to say this out loud. I was charismatic. So I tried a thing called warfare tongues. It's where you pray in tongues at the devil. Oh my goodness me. Heavens above. I flush even saying it because, of course, and I have to say it worked. For about 2 hours, and then I collapsed into even greater despair and exhaustion. I was resisting what is, wanting something else. Those who will not slip beneath the still surface of the well of grief, moving downward through the dark water to the place we cannot breathe. David White's great poem. He ends it by saying, nor find in the darkness glimmering the small round coins thrown away by those who wished for something else. I wanted anything but the desolation of my soul, stripped back, stripped bare, naked, vulnerable. I wept my way through my rites. I just sobbed and sobbed and sobbed. My weaver, Rob Jones, is here listening to me say this. He saw me weep and weep. And I have an image burned in my consciousness of that same man walking up a long hill after a day in the wilderness. And nothing had changed. Nothing had changed. The same man with the same situation. And yet something deep inside me said, it will be okay. And that place is the place of acknowledging the resistance and allowing it to be. Allowing it to be all, excuse the words, fucked up and still held and loved. Oh.
Yeah, that well is deep. I hear the constructed self that you were busy with that was not serving the true self. It reminds me of the poem by Wu Wei Wu. I love that name, Wu Wei Wu. He says, why are you so unhappy? Why are you so unhappy? And he answers it, thank God. Because, he says, because 98.98% of all that you do and all that you say is for yourself. And there isn't one. Oh.
So Jim, share a story about a time when you've resisted a power greater than yourself.
Well, yeah, a lot of resistance. But I want to speak to one that seems really palpable in this cacophony of men. I grew up with a deep father hunger, a longing for my dad to say just a few things to me that somehow he couldn't bring himself to say. I love you, I'm proud of you, and you're a good son. I was starving for that. I didn't know my dad was as broken as I was and that he had as many demons as I was wrestling with. I never saw that. And I came home during my first master's degree, Jim. I was such a good boy. Had short hair then, by the way. And I came home and it was probably one of the first times that I can really remember that my dad and I actually had, something of a moment of possibility in terms of conversation. I was probably 26 at the time. And I remember we were in his old beat up pickup. He was a man of the earth and the soil. He worked hard all of his life, a lot of pain in my dad's life. He had never, ever had a circle like this. And I'm sitting in that truck, not having any idea what to say to him. And in that silence, my dad didn't have anything. He didn't know what to say to me either, but I didn't know that then. And so he did the only thing he could do. He reached out to me. And he did it by telling me an off-color joke. Because that's how my dad communicated with his other men. He was a man of the oil field and, that kind of thing. And he was telling me some joke about a girl with short skirts or something like that. I wish I could remember that joke. I think it was a wide belt that looked like no. But, my religion had made me so good that I couldn't see him. And so as he told me that joke, all I could do was judge him and resist him. And I missed him in the process. Oh.
Okay. Your father's only feeble way, I hear you say, of connecting with you was something that you judged and resisted. And in so doing, you missed connecting with your Father. Oh, I see you. So, my brothers, Jim, when lately have you been surprised by a power greater than ourselves?
Well, I wish I had a lot of time to tell you this story. I'm going to have to hit the ground running. We had a Cocker Springer Spaniel of 17 years, and she died. She'd come into our lives right after my wife and I got married, and she was with us all the time. My daughters were growing up their early years, and when she died, I grieved so hard I swore I would never get another dog. But my daughters were after me about a year later. They were ready, and they knew we needed another dog, and I just did not want one, but I gave in. And so we bought this little puppy, Vishla puppy, hunting dog. She was gloriously beautiful. We named her Ruah, the animating breath of God out of the Hebrew. And I refused to give my heart to her. Everybody else instantaneously loved her, and it was my job to set all the rules, because they were oblivious. They were going to let her sleep with them and all kinds of stuff, No, she's going to get big, and, we need to start with what we expect to maintain. So we had this big-ass kennel in my wife and I's room, and so Ruah, we tell her, that's where you're sleeping. And it only took, she was brilliantly smart. And, within a few times, she would run in there all by herself. You didn't even have to shut the door, And she learned quickly that I would get up before my wife, and immediately she would want to engage me. So that tail would start wagging, just on the floor. I could hear it. I'm up here. I don't know if that's going to work, no. But I'd hear this thump, 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 thump on the door, on the floor, and I'd be like, and I'd do this thing, like how I tell y'all to quit drumming, And just like you guys, she would do, whoa, 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 whoa. And she knew, she learned real quickly, okay, Mom's not up yet. And so but she would lay there like this, and her eyes would just follow me all around the room while I'm moving. She wouldn't move, the whole time. And somehow she learned, too, that if Linda wasn't there, like if she got up before me, as soon as I'm up, she's, all bets are off, she's engaging me. And one morning it was just like that. Linda had gone. And so as soon as I rose up, just rose up in bed, thump, 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 there she goes. And I'm looking over at her, and I go, really? And she raises up, thump, 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 and her whole body, Vishla's, they just wiggle like this, this energy unbounded. And I go, really, again? And she goes, and I just hear it, thump, 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 and I go, every day? And she's like, yeah. I hear this great yes. I love you, I love you. I hear this, I love you, I love you, I love you. You're so wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. I want to be with you, with you, with you. Really? Yeah. Right now? Yeah. And it was just going over and over, and I hear this, and all of a sudden, brothers, a power greater than me spoke to me through Ruah, the animating breath of God. I love you, I love you, I love you. You are so wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. I want to be with you, with you, with you. Every day? Yes. Right now? Yes. I love you, I love you, I love you.
Oh, Jim. Oh, Jim. Your dog gave you the heart of that power that is greater than ourselves, for you, to you, with you, in you. Oh.
So, Richard, tell us how a power greater than you is showing up for you lately.
Well, every man in this circle just experienced that, what I'm going to share just now. So this is wonderful because now you all know what I'm talking about. And I'm not going to give the details, but it was our rites in August, just 2 months ago. And one man came to stand before me for this particular rite. And without sharing any detail, I wait for his gaze. And then I completed what I was doing with him. And then he held my gaze. Not for 20 seconds, not for 30 seconds, not even for a minute. 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes. I wondered why he was standing there, what he was waiting for. But then I let that voice let go and think there's something happening here, and I don't need to know what, because the longer it's going on, the tears are forming in his eyes. And as the tears form in his eyes, the tears form in mine. And before long, the two of us are staring into one another's eyes. I have no idea who this man is. I don't know his name at that moment in time. I have never met him until he'd come on the rites. And he is gazing into my eyes, and I'm gazing into his, and we are weeping in loving union. One of the most exquisite moments of intimacy I have ever known. And I was surprised by this, but of course my mind wanted to understand. So I asked him over a meal about 2 days later, what was that about? He said, I was waiting for the prompt to sit down. Ho!
Well, I hear the trickster of the great power, this more beautiful and more glorious, and she had her way with you and this brother, and came in the space that you created there, and you surrendered to it. And I hear that, brother. And you found a power greater than yourself. Oh. Well, brothers, I hope in these moments, counsel brings us into that conversation every time. Belden, the great conversation. In his book, Belden writes that if you're going to have the great conversation, it includes everything. Everything. Nothing gets left out. And I think that's what we've been intuiting and learning in our men's work, that everything belongs. And the power greater than ourselves is always, always, always breaking in. And always, when we hear that, encounter that power, it enlarges us. It enlarges us into what we don't know yet, the incarnation that lies on the edge of our life. So, brothers, we're going to invite you in this next time. You'll have about 40 minutes, 35 to 40 minutes to wander out toward the Cottonwood Pavilion. It takes about 20 minutes to wander out there, so you might just right away kind of move in that direction. And as you get close, you can branch out, but keep an eye on your watch, because at 11 o'clock sharp, we will start council. And Brad is ruthless. He looks all nice and everything, but he will not let you in. And so be there for sure at 11. And as you wander, we want you, as Timothy invited us to in the beginning, to encounter a power greater than yourself in the more than human world. And trust me, it is waiting to speak to us. It is waiting. And as you go, as you wander, these prompts that we have shared in this council circle, when have you encountered a power greater than yourself? How have you resisted that power that's greater than you? And lately, how is that power showing up in your life? Those are the prompts that you will be working with in your council circle. Council carriers, after we dismiss the group in silence, will you meet us right back here at the drum for a brief instructional period? So, brothers, you will leave here. You will hold the silence. You can leave everything that you want here. You don't need to take anything with you. And I'll give the prompt to you.
Brothers, if you do leave your things here, we'd ask that you leave them on the exterior walls, not at the chairs, because we need to reset the room. And also just a reminder that as you wander, please stay on the path. Do not wander through the fields until you get to the other side near the cottonwoods, and then you can go off road, which we would encourage.
Yeah. Ho. So would we stand, brothers? And just together, would we just raise our hands in a welcoming of a power greater than ourselves? We welcome that as we walk. And listen to this from wherever it speaks to you from. Ho.